Hello and welcome to Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite and try and figure out which show won for the week. And as always, like what you like, don't be a dick, let's begin. Opening match on NXT is a second round matchup in the Dusty Classic as MSK take on Killian Dane and Drake Maverick. Pretty good opening match here. It ends with MSK hitting their double team blockbuster move on Drake to win and advance to the semifinals. All I can say here is that my bracket is busted. I've been saying for weeks, nay, months, that my pick for the Dusty Classic was going to be Killian and Drake, and now they're out of the tournament. Who will I turn to? Outside the CWC, Pete Dunne dropping off his kids, ONEY, LORCAN, and Danny Burch in their van, and then we see a promo, or an interview I should say, with CURT STALLION, who's supposed to be wrestling for the Cruiserweight Championship later in the evening. Talks about all the miles he's spent going up and down the road, and how the road represents what he wants his life to be lived like, and how becoming the Cruiserweight Champion will keep him living a life like that. I got some big Matthew McConaughey vibes from CURT in this sit-down interview he was doing. We then go to our next matchup. It's a women's Dusty Classic first round match as Aaliyah and Jessica Maya take on Raquel Gonzalez and Dakota Kai. Good to see good old Robert Stone back on TV. I feel like I haven't seen him in a while, but it's always great to see more managerial representation on NXT. Raquel and Dakota have some great teamwork here, punctuated by Raquel's raw power on her opponents. In the end, Team Kick wins after a one-arm powerbomb by Raquel onto Kumeya. The Way are interviewed backstage. Candice LeRae and Indie Wrestling say the Women's Dusty Classic is theirs for the taking. Meanwhile, Johnny Gargano hates hearing the name Kushida uttered in his presence. They all storm off, and then in the background we see Dexter Lumis pop out from the curtains to remind you that he's still there. We get another vignette of Scarlett doing some cryptic tarot card readings. Then we get a plug for Tegan Knox appearing on Brie Larson's YouTube channel soon about her road to recovery. And then our next match sees Tyler Russ taking on Dante Rios. Last week, Tyler made his own match with Bronson Reed and paid for it, so this week Malcolm Bivens has hand-selected Rios as Tyler's opponent. It's a pretty one-sided matchup here. Dante gets a couple of shots in, but Bivens with the distraction, allowing Russ to win with a very painful-looking version of Rings of Saturn, and then Bivens shades of Sonny Ono by taking a selfie in the middle of the ring with he and Tyler standing over the fallen Dante Rios. Pretty nice way for Tyler to bounce back after his loss last week to Reed. We get a Finn Balor interview backstage, but before he can say anything, Kyle O'Reilly with the early interruption, some palpable tension between these two rivals here, but they basically agree that they're ready for the tag team match later on. Can they trust each other? Does it really matter? Who knows? Second round matchup in the Men's Dusty Classic next as the Grizzled Young Veterans take on Leon Ruff and Kushida. Zach Gibson makes fun of Kushida for wearing jeans and calls Leon a one-hit wonder. Speaking of Ruff, I really liked his action in the ring tonight. His maneuvering around his opponents was really fun to watch. It's a fun match. I love the back and forth here. Ultimately, Gibson and Drake had ticket to Mayhem onto Ruff to win and advance to the semifinals. Then after the match, Gibson and Drake are posing with the giant Dusty trophy, and suddenly Johnny Gargano and Austin Theory run down to the ring to jump Ruff and Kushida. Johnny hits one final beat on Kushida while Theory's got Ruff detained on the outside. Suddenly, Dexter Lumis pops up behind Theory, gives him quite a spook, and that's pretty much where the segment ends as the Way run off. I am liking the build toward this inevitable North American title match with Gargano and Kushida, wondering where Dexter Lumis fits into all this though. Backstage, CURT STALLION is beaten down in the locker room, so the planned Cruiserweight title match will not be happening this evening. Later on, we see GM Regal confronting Santos Escobar and his buddies and accuses them of being involved in the beatdown, but they deny everything. Regal says that the title match will take place next week, and if somehow CURT's unable to perform then, there will be severe consequences for Legado del Fantasma. And after he leaves, they stumble upon one of the tarot cards from the Scarlett vignette earlier. They're all really spooked about it for a second, and they're like, ah, just kidding, and they laugh it off. So, interesting turn of events here. Seeing maybe Karrion Kross is like maybe targeting the Cruiserweight Champion. Should be interesting if that actually comes to fruition. It's Toni time. Toni Storm in the ring, and she calls out Io Shirai, blaming her for losing her shot at winning the Women's Dusty Classic. Now she wants the Women's Championship as revenge. Io comes out and she says, she tells Toni she'll fight her anytime, anywhere, doesn't like Toni. Toni goes for a takedown, but Io ends up chasing her out of the ring. Then Mercedes Martinez runs runs in and jumps Io. We get a bit of an awkward exchange with Toni and Mercedes kind of fighting over who will symbolically hold the championship next. That allows Io to fight back a little bit, but then Toni with many hip attacks, laying Io out in the ring and standing tall with the belt. I like the build-up, the setup in this segment here. You know, it's not just Storm that Io's got to worry about here. What will become of the alliance, though, between Storm and Mercedes Martinez? Isaiah Swerve Scott's interviewed backstage. What was with him getting in Bronson Reed's face before his match last week? Scott takes offense to that because he says he was basically doing what Reed did to him in a match of his beforehand. He gets mad when people point the finger at Swerve Scott, he says. So he has the interview lady point the finger at him, and he responds, "How many fingers are pointed back at you?" I don't know, I didn't get it. We get a hype package from Imperium showing 3/4 of the group together again. They hype up Walter, how dominant he's been as the NXT UK champion, but how, you know, they've been isolated from each other since the pandemic last year. And the promo ends with Alexander Wolf saying, "My arrival was just the beginning." Sounds like maybe Walter's coming to NXT US very soon. Time will tell, but if that's true, it's very exciting to think about. And then we see Adam Cole and Roderick Strong being interviewed backstage, asked about their upcoming matchup next week with Tommaso Ciampa and Timothy Thatcher. They know how tough those two are individually, they say, but they know that UE has better team chemistry, and they're confident they will come out of that matchup on top. Isaiah Swerve Scott takes on Bronson Reed in a rematch from a few weeks ago. It's always fun to watch Reed throwing his weight around here, and I think Swerve especially is just bumping his ass off for Bronson, making him look really good here. Swerve still works the arm and shoulder of Bronson, hits a 450, but we get a kick out. Reed pushing through, hits the tsunami from the top rope to win yet again. And so we see Swerve after the match looking very frustrated with himself. Seems to be seeing, you know, something building inside of him. The only question now feels like, when will that finally burst forth? We get what starts out as a Tommaso Ciampa promo backstage, talking about the fights you win, the fights you lose, and the fights you remember, the ones that command respect. As he's saying that, we see Timothy Thatcher join him and sit next to him in the promo, and Ciampa completes the promo saying, you know, the fight pit, you know, it changes people, and it brings about respect out of that struggle. So that's why he's accepting this challenge here of teaming up with Ciampa to be part of the Dusty Classic. And then they say it's going to be a war against the UE next week. It's a pretty cool promo. In your main event, rivals are turned into unlikely allies as Kyle O'Reilly and Finn Balor take on ONEY, LORCAN, and Danny Burch in a non-title matchup here. The story for Kyle is he's still selling the jaw injury from their last title match together. A very physical match here. Kyle gets the hot tag and completely helps destroy the tag team champions. Wins for his team when he intercepts Burch in midair with a leg lock, makes Burch tap out, and then afterward, Pete Dunne shows up and he and the tag champs assault both guys. Suddenly we see the rest of the UE run in there, and Cole and Strong running in to make the save. We see the Undisputed Era and Finn Balor staring across to Pat's pack, and for a split second I thought we were going to get a moment where Finn just throws the Undisputed Era hand gesture up to show some kind of temporary solidarity or union against the baddies. We don't get that though. Finn leaves the ring and lets the other three stare down Dunne and LORCAN and Burch to close up the show. I'm digging the build between Balor and Dunne. Kyle still being involved makes things interesting, keeps things kind of up in the air as to who's next and where the title scene is going to go from here, leading into the next takeover down the line. Dynamite begins with a match between Eddie Kingston and Lance Archer. Bad blood stemming all the way back from the Casino Battle Royal at Double or Nothing. Archer telling Jacob the Snake Up to go to the back as this match begins here. Hard-hitting match from the get-go. A lot of fun to watch. Archer with a big chokeslam to Kingston over the top rope and onto the apron. Looked absolutely brutal. Then runs Kingston's face right into the camera lens on the outside. Archer has a couple chances to beat Kingston here, but he takes his time. And finally we see the Butcher and the Blade have Jake the Snake hostage on stage, while the Bunny hands Kingston some brass knuckles, spinning back fist with the loaded fist with the referee's not looking. That allows Kingston to win, and then after the bell, the baddies beat down Archer a little bit more. Yeah, pretty physical opening matchup here, and again, that bump that Kingston took over the top rope was just horrific to watch. Jon Moxley with a pre-taped promo up next, talks about how he's confused what's going on with the Young Bucks and the Good Brothers, and right now I'm pretty confused about that as well. He talks about he's confused where the Lucha Brothers stand with him, but he says no matter what happens, he he knows that Beach Break and that six-man tag is going to be pretty wild, incendiary even, he says. Sting and Darby Allin then speak. We see a promo of them in some dark warehouse somewhere, and Sting takes offense to Taz's comments referring to he and Darby as hoodlums. He says, well, you know, Darby's a hoodlum. And then Darby takes a skateboard and he breaks out one of the windows with it, and then he calls Sting a hoodlum, and Sting then takes his bat and breaks some more windows in the warehouse, and he admits that he is a hoodlum and says it's going to be showtime in the street fight at Revolution against Team Taz. I thought, you know, it's a different kind of Sting promo from what we've seen in the last several weeks. Seeing Sting and Darby break their silence together, I thought was excellent as well. So yeah, I dug it. Up next, MJF and Chris Jericho take on the Varsity Blondes. By the way, I'm loving MJF and Jericho's new hybrid theme. Both songs are in the same key, and when you up the tempo in MJF's theme to match Judas, it actually works surprisingly well. So anyway, I really enjoyed this match. Griff Garrison and Brian Pillman Jr. look great against the Inner Circle here, but ultimately Jericho takes Pillman out of the sky with the Judas effect, then hits a picture-perfect lion salt to end the match, and he makes direct eye contact with the lens of the camera, because of course last week he didn't hit the lion salt so well, got a lot of flack for that, so he made good this week. Good on you, Jericho, you showed them. And so then after the match, the Inner Circle are celebrating in the ring. Still some more tension between MJF and Sammy Guevara. More on that later though. We get a Pac promo where he says Kenny Omega's acting like Billy Big Bollocks lately, but he says that at Beach Break, the Lucha Brothers will show the Elite what Brotherhood's all about. We then get a recap of Shaquille O'Neal's comments toward Cody Rhodes and calls him a punk with blonde hair. He looks like a girl, says let's have a fight, let's have it in March even. And then we get Cody in the ring to respond to Shaquille O'Neal and Jade Cargill. Cody says he'd rather just pitch this match where it's going to be he and Brandy against Shaq and Jade, but of course Brandy is with child, so she cannot compete. Cody defers to Coach Arn to decide what to do next. Hard time for me to hear what Arn's saying in this promo because the feed I'm getting does begin to cut out, so there's a lot of periods of time where there's total silence, but I'm able to parse most of what Arn is talking about. He talks about the importance of being a father and stuff. He brings up an anecdote about how Dusty, after wrestling this big match, he hauled ass back home to witness Cody's birth and everything. Very sweet story. And he basically brings out Red Velvet because he says, I've seen something in the last couple weeks you should really look into. So Red Velvet comes out, who's been kind of Brandy's protege as of late, and she says she's tired of Jade's antics and wants to stir her bitch ass up. So basically, Cody looks to be picking Brandy Light as his replacement opponent for the mixed tag at Revolution. Just squint your eyes, you won't be able to tell the difference. I mean, in all fairness though, I think that they do need to spend more time, like now is the time to really build up Red Velvet, because I don't watch Dark, and I know those people who don't watch Dark and don't know what Red Velvet's all about. We see a little bit of her on Dynamite that shows there is a connection with her and Brandy, and that explains why she's stepping in for her. I get that. But I mean, just from more of a character level, I know nothing about Red Velvet other than she's Brandy's protege. So hopefully in this time, we can learn quickly why she's a worthy replacement. Kip Sabian, Penelope Ford, and Miro invite everybody to the wedding next week at Beach Break, and they say that the butler, Charles Taylor, will be there too. Next match sees Hangman Page taking on Ryan Nemeth, who is also, by the way, Dolph Ziggler's younger brother. The match begins. Matt Hardy shows up at ringside to do some scouting, as it seems. Good work between the two here, but it's pretty academic. Page wins the buckshot lariat. Then afterward, we get this kind of look between Page and Hardy. Tony Schiavone comes to the ring because he wants to know what's going on. What's the scoop, guys? So Hardy basically says, you know, Page seems lost and conflicted. He says he doesn't want anything from Page, but he's offering him a spot to dress in his locker room because he sees, oh, Page is dressing by himself out in the hallway and stuff. You can come to my locker room. There's plenty of room, you know, but no strings attached. So will Page take the offer? Will this lead to something more between them? Seems like the story right now is that Page is kind of a man on an island without a country, and all these people are kind of asking for his services. Dark Order, possibly Matt Hardy in the future, and he doesn't seem to want any of that. So where will that lead? Up next, Dax Harwood of FTR takes on Jungle Boy of the Jurassic Express. Cash Wilder and Tully Blanchard are handcuffed to Luchasaurus to prevent any shenanigans. It's a great match here. Dax is such a good worker in general, and Jungle Boy has such tremendous ability. These two tell a great story in in the ring. The match ends with a lot of pinfall attempts being traded. Finally, Jungle Boy gets Dax in the STF, and you see this moment here where Tully and Cash are both reaching out and Luchasaurus pulls them back, and then Dax taps out, and so Jungle Boy wins clean as a whistle, which I did not expect. Big honkin' win for Jungle Boy here. Then after the match though, Tully throws powder into Luchasaurus' eyes, which kind of gets, you can clearly see that Cash is also hit by that too, but he doesn't sell it. So they knock out Luchasaurus and they beat up Jungle Boy, and then you see FTR cutting the horns off Luchasaurus' mask. Ooh, the disrespect. Finally, Marco Stunt and his golden chair and SCU run off the baddies, and that's how we end that one. So yeah, great match with a hell of a surprise ending. I never would have thought that, you know, Dax would have lost clean like he did here, and building up more for these two teams in the future now that the horns have been cut. Outside the arena, Team Taz wants to respond to Sting and Darby Allin's comments when they notice a merch table nearby selling almost exclusively Sting and Darby merchandise. They take offense to that. They beat up the merchandise crew. They lawn dart one of them into the truck, and Will Hobbs like powerbomb slams somebody through the other table and stuff. Very destructive, and Taz saying that Starks and Cage are going to beat Sting and Darby Allin's ass in the street fight at Revolution. Up next, Dr. Britt Baker taking on Shanna in singles action. It's a pretty good match here. My favorite part though is as Britt's getting her heat, you have Rebel in the background who then like applies like a touch-up makeup onto Shanna's face while Britt's working over, which I thought was hilarious. Shanna picks up a lot of momentum, but ultimately Rebel distracts the referee. That allows Britt to get the lockjaw in to win. And then afterwards, she wants to put more of a hurting on Shanna when suddenly Thunder Rosa shows up and chases Rebel and Britt out of the arena. So of course, Thunder and Britt is going to they're going to be wrestling next week at Beach Break. I'm looking forward to that match a lot. Backstage, you see MJF trying to play peacemaker once again, this time with Sammy Guevara. He says that he didn't know Wardlow was going to get involved in their matchup last week, but Sammy sees right through the act. MJF kind of changes his tone and asks, "Are you sure you want to play it this way?" And Sammy gets right in his face and says, "I'm not playing." So then MJF leaves in a huff. So far, Sammy Guevara is not being fooled by MJF's attempts to kind of like play peacekeeper with everyone in the inner circle. Then we see backstage, the Young Bucks and the Good Brothers. Carl Anderson is very hyped for this Bullet Club reunion, but Matt and Nick Jackson want to make sure that Don Callis doesn't get involved. Gallows and Anderson admit that it was actually Callis, it was Don's idea to beat up Penta last week, which the Bucks said they wanted no part of. Then Kenny Omega and Callis show up. Things get heated just before the main event match. We go to that one now. Main event, 8-man tag team match. You've got champions teaming with champions, which feels kind of historic here. The Young Bucks and the Good Brothers teaming up against the Dark Order here. I love seeing John Silver stand up to LG, by the way. That was pretty hilarious. Stu Grayson, the Big House of Fire, when he first gets involved in the matchup, and Silver's hot tag at the end was also really fun to watch. I'd say that like John Silver right now is up there with Luchasaurus as one of my favorite hot tags in AEW right now. Despite the tension, there's still a good amount of teamwork between the AEW and Impact tag champs. Then a Meltzer driver onto Grayson seals it, so the Bucks and the Good Brothers win. Afterward, Matt gets on the mic and talks about the tag team battle royal next week and how the Bucks are in that match, and if they win, they get to handpick their opponents at Revolution. And he said it could be anyone. As he says anyone, he looks right at Gallows and Anderson, and so all of a sudden you see Rey Fenix show up to the ring. He fights and then he gets beaten up. Then Jon Moxley appears to clean house as well. Kenny Omega then shows up, but he walks right into a paradigm shift, and Moxley stands tall as we fade to black, and that's their final build toward Beach Break. Sort of a chaotic way to end the show. I will just say in general, right now, I'm not digging the way Kenny Omega is being booked in AEW as their champion. I mean, he's on Impact a lot these days, which is great for Impact, but I feel that it's hurting how it's being treated in AEW. And I'm sure him not being on AEW as much makes him like super heel in some respects, but I mean, he's the champion and he should be on there more than like 2 minutes at a time, which I feel is his weekly average as of late when he's not actually wrestling. Yeah, and then for him to just walk right in and take a finisher, and that's pretty much his only in-ring involvement in this show, it seemed pretty quick for him. And so, I don't know, like I said, hopefully Beach Break will be a good turnaround as the build to Revolution really intensifies. We'll see more of him. But in the last couple of weeks especially this week, I was just not digging Omega's involvement. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite. And this week, my opinion is AEW was the better show. I mean, neither show this week to me was like really knocked down, drag out excitement from bell to bell, but I think AEW's matches kept me engaged a whole lot more. I like how the build to Revolution's going right now. My one real gripe with AEW this week was just, Red Velvet as the replacement for Brandy. Yeah, it's the obvious logical choice, but only because you've briefly seen them together. So, but I mean, again, they have a couple of weeks now to really kind of build up Red Velvet and make us care that she's Brandy's replacement in this match that inexplicably involves Shaquille O'Neal. How's that going to go down? Who knows? That's for them to decide. But what did you all think of NXT and AEW this week? Let me know in the comment section below. And keep your eyes peeled for later this week when Jay Biggs and I give you our Royal Rumble predictions. So stay tuned for that. Until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.